Hello, welcome back to part 2 of building a 50s diner. For Silver Falls, we are using Unity, and we are creating the Flying Saucer Diner as found in the Silver Falls games. So that would be Silver Falls, Galaxy Bound Curses referenced in the novel Heavy Shadow, and also Three Down Stars on the Nintendo 3DS. So while you guys were away, I had filled in some of the floor, so we can start to get a look of how the building looks in terms of size. So I actually took out one wall here. That would be 3 meters of it because the building was too stretched out and I wanted to make it feel cozy. So again, looking at our original pixel art for this building, I feel like that's pretty close in terms of um, aspect ratio of our building. So I want to show you guys just a fun little trick, okay? I'm going to select multiple of these units here, and I'm going to duplicate that, and then I'm going to move that across. That is on the Z axis, okay? And we can go ahead put that at 10, and we can see that it works out all right. Now, what I have noticed is that these pieces don't seem to line up well. At the moment, it doesn't really bother me. If it did bother you, there is more work that you could do to sort of even that out. You can see I'm using these smaller pieces here, but they do seem to line up on this side. So there would be some degree of shifting you would have to do, but at the moment, I don't mind that. You know, it doesn't really bother me. It's going to be covered over by a lot of things, so it's not so important. What's more important now is showing you a neat trick that I'll use to save myself a little bit of time for the ceiling. So I've actually grouped, I'll move my, temporarily grab my hierarchy window. You can see I've grouped all my floors in here. So what I'm going to do now, that usually lives on a different screen. Okay, let's see. Okay, what I will do now, I actually forgot to start my timer, so I'll go ahead and hit my timer now so I can keep track. What I'm going to do is make sure this is highlighted. I'm going to duplicate that. Let's see that I've duplicated it. Now I have a whole set. I've grabbed the parent of that. I've duplicated the parent. I'm going to raise that right on up. Okay. Now I can easily use that for the roof, but it would make it difficult for me to build my room. So what I'm going to do is select all of these pieces. It's a little bit of a cheat here. And if these were using mesh colliders, it may not be a good idea because you would be inverting the mesh collider, which can cause issues. If you don't want your model to be read and write enabled, read and write uses more um, memory, so I like to have everything with read and write off, but if you invert your scale to a negative number, you have to have read and write on. These are just box colliders, so it's not a big deal, all right? So you can see that I now have a ceiling, okay? So I've accidentally made a mistake. I don't want to change. What have I done here? Just wanted to invert it, right? It's my mistake. What have I done here? Redo. Control Y, as you can see. What I actually wanted to do was grab this guy. Okay. So in terms of Z, let's go ahead and ah, lost myself a little bit. I was looking for the Y-axis. I'm just like making sure I hadn't shifted that. So I'm going to check that, and I'm going to move that where I think it needs to be, right about there. And that wants it to be at 3. Perfect. Just wanted to make sure all my measurements were lined up correctly. Now I can see that there are no seams. That looks good. So it doesn't look right to have the ceiling the same as the floors. So what I'm going to do is now select all of my uh, ceiling objects, which I've done there, and I'm going to change this material. That's the only material. They all share the same material, and I've already set this up ahead of time. So what I'm going to do is grab that and drop that in there, and it may be hard to see for the time being, but what that is a wood material that I prepared ahead of time. that I want to give this place more of a rustic feel as opposed to just, like a sort of a clean, like a city imitation diner. So I've turned the lighting off, and you can see we've got what look like old wood boards up on the ceiling just to give it a bit more character. Now, as you can see, it's going to be a little bit funny because we don't have a roof, which means that shadows are being cast, or the light's being cast over the top there. Okay, so we're going to ignore that for now because, again, if I have a ceiling or a roof there, it's going to make it difficult for me to place my objects. So I'm leaving that off for now. I'm not going to worry about it. But, so ignore the light on that wall. So you can see that things are not quite right here. Don't worry about that for now, for the time being. So I've put this in the oven earlier, and now we can take it out. It's hot and fresh, and I've prepared this just quickly. What I want to do is populate this a bit later. This is a clean project, but in my other projects, I have all sorts of products for the Silver Falls universe. What I want to do is set a bottle of hot sauce in there, and there's quite a few other sauces. You have bland cream, you have mousse sauce or mousse cream. So I'll have to reach into my other Silver Falls projects and import them for the time being. I'll leave that here, but I think it would make each table look interesting to use one prefab and then drop in different sauces per table, scatter them around to make it look more alive and lived in. So I'm just going to grab this and I'm going to duplicate it. Oh, unfortunately, this isn't really going to line up just perfectly, but we'll see how we go, right? There is some fudging I have to do here now. It's going to be slightly imperfect, okay? And we'll go ahead and dupe that one more time with Control D. You can see that we are running into the front door, the entrance here. So I'm just going to have that slightly imperfect. And I want to line up with that wall right there. We can have a bit of storage back here. We can have something, some sort of table, which means that we're going to have about that space and that space for people to come in. I would like maybe to put a small bench here and here so people can sit, and I'd like to have a coat rack. So we'll see how we go with that. But that gives me an idea of what we have to work with, which means we need a little bit of space here. We'll have a table, a little bit of space, which means we could probably have 2 rows of tables here. That'll give us plenty of space to put our fireplace and our couch here. Okay. Now, I was saying this doesn't quite look right. Something's not right here. So the lighting is all off. What we need now is a reflection probe to inform all of these objects how they should be reflecting. I'm going to enable that. You can see things are a little bit better, but this has not been baked for this environment yet. We hit the bake button. Let's have a look at our, ooh, we've zoomed right on out of there. Let's go ahead and zoom back in with our F key. Okay, back to our reflection probe. Let's go ahead and inch ourselves closer and closer to that. And this has taken a 360 snapshot of the world around it so that our objects now know how they should be reflecting the materials around them. You can see the sunrise. Well, it's a bit past sunrise, isn't it? When you look through the windows, it sort of cuts down the glare a little bit. You can see the sun just there. What I really want to do is angle the sun so it is a bit more of an intense sunrise as we are looking out the windows. Now we have our seats here. So just as a quick and dirty operation, we'll go ahead and highlight all 3 of them, move them across. I'll line it up the same way I did the other. But what I think I'm going to do is, no, that looks fine. I want to put the fireplace somewhere here, okay? Which means I've got a bit of room for, well, maybe I can put a bench here, coat rack here, an umbrella rack, and somewhere to sort of, we're definitely going to need a rug on the, or some steps and a rug for people's muddy or snow-covered shoes. Okay, so now we have that much of the diner assembled. Thanks to our reflection probe. Again, let's go ahead and turn that off and see what a difference the reflection probe makes. Okay, it's quite dull, doesn't seem right. And turn that on, it suddenly feels like it's right. Now, with the tiles, it seems that they're catching a bit too much light off at an angle. What I'm going to do is knock that down. Okay, so I can see it's quite plain I feel that's a bit too plain for my taste, and I want um, the tiles to have more dimensionality, to feel a little bit more uneven. So I've taken the normal map, I've put that in as a secondary map, I've put that in at 2, but I feel they're just catching a little bit too much light. So you see they're way up. I'm going to dial that down just a bit, and I actually want them to be a little metallic. You can see you can adjust this. You can mess with these all day long until it feels just right to you. Uh, so I think something like that uh, sort of fits more of what I would like to see in there once we have more detailed maps available and whatnot. So you can see as we sort of tilt, because we have that now, that sort of multiplied the normal angles, you can see the tiles catch at different angles and they have more dimensionality and they have more imperfections to them, which I believe makes things look a bit more interesting and a bit more fun. Okay, and now just for fun, let's start populating just some small things in here just for fun. Okay, now we want to get our fireplace. Let me check here. And while I look through my prefabs that I've popped in the oven a bit earlier, I'll have a quick sip of coffee. That's good coffee. Okay, that's not quite the one I was looking for. We want this fella just here. Okay. Now, what we are going to have to do is figure out a way how this guy can vent. I'm actually going to have to build a pipe so that this can extend out. So it's likely going to have to um, cut through one of these beams, which I am not a giant fan of. So this means that I'm going to modify this model. I'm going to cut out the angle there, and I'm going to build an extension for this pipe. I may have to just replace the pipe entirely, and I'm going to extend it up through the ceiling. So for now, I think I'm going to make use of my space here. What I want to do is set it right there. Okay. We'll think about it. We'll give it a bit more thought. I'll have a log pile, stack of logs there. But what I think would be really nice is to have a nice, comfortable carpet. So here's one that I've somewhat pre-prepared. I've prepared a little bit in advance. I've popped it in the oven, and it seems like it's now about time to take it out. So here we go. You can see having that on the roof has actually made it a little bit irritating when I'm trying to drag my prefab onto the scene. It's actually catching on the ceiling here. So what we are going to do is I'm going to select all of those ceiling pieces. Let's see here. I have a few corner pieces that are going to make it a bit irritating. So I'm actually going to disable the box collider on those pieces there. Okay, I'll have to manually select around my corners, and I disable my box colliders. I can turn that back on easily at any time. Now, this should work correctly when I try to drop my carpet under there. Fantastic. Okay. Something that I used, a fun technique that well, I wouldn't say fun, but it's quite useful. Something I quite like about the standard shader in Unity is that I can use, this doesn't have to be an enormous resolution. I'll go ahead and select it. You can see this is an atlas that has a bunch of different things in it. This is, so I'm only using a small portion of that, but I wanted to have a bit more detail on there. So I've used a secondary map. So I'll sort of show you the material that I've used. Is this, and that overlays that on top, and it gives it a bit more texture. So as you're looking at it from a distance, it looks a bit more dimensional and interesting to look at. Now, one thing I want to point out is anisotropic filtering. This is something that wasn't available to me when I was developing on the 3DS, and I developed for a long time without it, so I'm extremely grateful to have it. As we look at this object at an angle, you can see there's banding going on here, and it gets blurry at what they describe as oblique angles. This is unpleasant to the eye. So I will show you quickly how to adjust that if you're not familiar with that. you want to go select these into your project selector. So I'm selecting these on my project. You can see in the inspector, all right, you can see anisotropic level or anisole level is at 1. I like to have that at around 10, and we will see the difference that it makes. After just a moment, you can see that Bob is your uncle. Fantastic. Those are nice, clean, detailed materials now. This looks very clean to me. What I'm going to do, again, is later on, I have a library of grunge filters that I've created. I'm going to apply some. I'm going to test some. So it dirties up the tables a little bit. It gives them some imperfections, and it makes it more interesting to look at. It makes it feel more realistic, and it makes the world feel more lived in. All right, so I'm going to start setting up my walls in here, and I'm going to take a short break, but we will start dropping in some tables, and we will measure in, and we can see how many tables we can fit in there. So thank you very much for joining me on part 2 of this Building a 50s Diner, and I hope you will check in again for the next video where we can populate the walls. We'll start filling in the bar, and we'll put in some lighting just to make it interesting. Thanks for checking in. I hope you'll check in again soon, and we will see you in the next one, which would be part 3. Okay then.